Hello, and welcome to the East Africa Business Podcast. I'm Sam Floy, and I'm here on the continent to learn about the emerging business scene. I'll be interviewing startups, investors, and organisations who are all playing their part in helping the region develop and grow. And in doing this podcast, I'll be sharing with you the things that I learned along the way. One of the byproducts of a country's development is the amount of waste it produces. As populations grow, the number of, say, plastic bottles that are consumed increases. It's costly both financially and environmentally to transfer these materials to a dump site. Matthew, from The Recycler, wants to change this. His business is all about creating value out of products that would otherwise be thrown away to increase the amount of recycling that occurs. We discuss why Tanzania is a prime location for this type of business, the applications of waste, and how he's growing maggots as a more sustainable form of chicken feed. It's a really interesting and wide-ranging conversation, so I hope you enjoy. So I'm here today with Matthew from The Recycler, and we're sat by the beach in Dar es Salaam. So if it's a bit windy and there's a bit of background noise, it's just the sea breeze, so sorry about that. But anyway, for now, Matthew, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
So to get us started, could you tell us a bit about you and a bit about The Recycler?
All right. I come from the United States. I arrived in Tanzania about 4 years ago to work with the UN. And then I started The Recycler, which is a waste management and recycling company that also grows maggots for insect-derived protein.
Wow. Okay. So right. So which do you want to talk about first? Should we talk about the recycling bit?
Yeah. I think it kind of all ties into waste. So The Recycler, essentially what it does is it works with large companies like Serena Hotel, Tanzanian Breweries, Twiga Cement, U.S. Embassy, to do recycling collections, recycling sorting. We collect a wide variety of different items. We've got about 20 staff, and we recycle around 170 tons per month. And while we were doing this, we were trying to find ways to add value to different types of material. That includes stuff like organic waste, which is kind of how the maggots came about.
Okay. So when did the company start?
It started in 2014, in October, so we just had our 2-year anniversary last month.
All right, and what's been the biggest lesson you've had in those 2 years?
There's a lot of lessons, obviously. I guess for me, starting and getting started really quickly, it took us a while to start. It took me about a year trying to get the right capital and things when I should have just started right away. Also, any business will tell you about cash flow and how cash flow can kill businesses, and hiring the right people. Yeah.
Okay, so how many people do you have working?
Now we have around 20 to 25 staff.
Okay, and are they split between recycling and maggots?
So we have only about 3 or 4 people on maggots, and all the rest are on recycling.
Okay, and what are the main functions that they need to do?
So the people on the sites are essentially people who are sorting waste. So on a typical site like a hotel, we'll have one person that receives all of the waste and separates the recyclables from the non-recyclables. So the idea is that if a company is taking waste to the dump site twice a day, like a big hotel will take waste to the dump site twice a day, if you have a person on site that receives that waste and then separates the recyclables out of that, you can reduce the amount of collections that they have to pay for to go to the dump site, and therefore saving them money. So you can reduce from 2 collections to, say, 1 collection, and then we charge a management fee for the staff on site, and then we sell the recyclables.
Oh, cool. So can you just sort of talk me through the process of how your customers were dealing with their waste before and how they deal with it now?
Yeah, essentially most people were just taking it straight to the dump site, so no recycling was being taken out. And so now we set up different bins, we organize for all the recyclables as possible to be taken out. Yeah.
And are they doing this sort of out of goodwill for the planet, or what's the main reason?
Yeah, so it can save them money. That's the main thing. If you reduce the amount of money it costs you to take waste to the dump site, it can save you money in that thing. There are some companies who do it out of the goodwill of their heart, or because they have kind of corporate responsibilities to do so.
Okay. And so what do you do with it once you have all the stuff?
Yeah, definitely. So we're working with a lot of companies all locally here that do different types of processing. So the white paper goes to the company that makes it into tissue paper and Kleenexes. The glass goes back to a company that makes it back into glass. The cardboard goes into envelopes, canned to scrap metals, etc.
Oh, I see. So you're sort of like reselling the stuff that was otherwise going in the.
Exactly. So we're sorting it so that it can actually be taken out. The whole plan of the business was to get access as much waste as possible, find the different markets for the waste that existed, and then add value to the waste that doesn't have a market or it doesn't have a any type of place where people want it. So we can reduce waste as much as possible.
Wow. What's your background? How did you get into this?
My background is actually not in waste at all. I studied development economics at the University of Cambridge. So I don't have a background in that, but I did. I also studied in South Africa at the University of Stellenbosch, and I set up the first recycling system there. And that's kind of where I got exposed to it. And I worked for about a year with a big recycling company in South Africa and learned a lot about the industry.
All right. What are the main things that you learned?
I learned that you can obviously make money from this if you can separate things correctly. I learned that it's a great way to create jobs. You're literally creating jobs from things that would otherwise be thrown away. And I've learned that everybody has waste. People always continue to produce waste.
Okay. And so talking, how did the maggots then? What's the process there?
Yeah. So the maggots essentially is that we have a lot of organic waste. In Tanzania, up to 60% of waste is organic waste. And it's really difficult to do different projects with organic waste. The options are compost, which is very expensive and usually subsidized in developed countries. There is biogas, which needs a lot of investment as well. So we're looking for what's a good solution for organic waste that's produced. And that's where the maggots came in. They're native insects to Tanzania. They breed between 26 and 32 degrees Celsius. So this is literally the most perfect temperature for them. And they're everywhere. If I put waste in my bin at home and I leave the lid off of a bucket, they will fly in, lay eggs, eat all of my waste, and crawl out. So it's quite amazing, actually.
All right, and then who's buying the maggots?
Yeah, so the idea of the maggots is that they're for chicken feed. So chickens eat a mixture of different things. The main part, the most expensive part, is the protein, and that usually comes from soy or from fish meal. And you need a certain amount of protein so the chickens can grow faster. If you look at the World Wildlife Fund website, one of the top things, it's about us, and then soy, because soy is incredibly bad for the planet. It uses lots of water. It's blamed for the destruction of the rainforest, for killing off a lot of endangered species. So it's a huge problem in the way that we feed our fish. And the other substitute is fish meal. And the problem with fish meal is that the fish are completely overfished. The fisheries are running out. About 80% of fisheries in the world now are basically gone. And so we need a new way to feed our animals, our livestock.
And is it safe to feed fish and chickens maggots?
Yeah, definitely. These maggots are they're amazing. I could talk all day about them. Essentially, these maggots, when they eat organic waste, they have, they don't leave any kind of disease or anything like that out. They're also not like your normal houseflies. They're a little bit bigger. They look like wasps. This specific fly is called the black soldier fly. And when it becomes an adult, a fly, it doesn't have even a moving mouth part, so it doesn't even eat. So a normal fly will run, land on some poop, eat the poop, and then land on your food and throw up the poop or something like that. This doesn't happen, obviously, with these maggots because they only eat when they're larvae. So that's a really benefit. So they don't spread disease. They're not vectors for diseases. And chickens, this is what chickens been eating, throughout the whole evolutionary process. They weren't eating soy or fish. They don't swim. They've been eating bugs and insects forever.
Right. And so has anyone been doing this elsewhere?
Yeah, so there are a couple companies, probably around 5 or 6 that are doing this on a large scale. AgriProtein is probably the leader, the innovation one. They produce around 7 to 8 tons per day, and they've kind of showed that this is markedly viable. They're in South Africa. There's also a company in the Netherlands. There's a company in Canada that are doing this. There's even one in America, in Ohio. So this is a new way to feed it. If you look at chickens, in order to produce 1 kilogram of chicken, you need 2 kilograms of input. So 2 kilograms of something that they're going to eat, which is a very inefficient way. So we're basically, wasting significant amounts of grains and feed and the resources that have that. So looking for a new way is something that a lot of people are very interested in.
And so, who is it that you're selling to? Who is like the end customer of these maggots?
Yeah, so the end customer is people who produce feeds, essentially. We are still in the part where we're doing a lot of research on it and making sure everything's going, and we're in the process of scaling up. But we also have another product, which is essentially, so we have a commercial scale production that we're working on right now to bring up. And then we also have a small scale bin that we're looking to sell to residents, to small scale chicken farmers, where essentially what they do is they have this bin, they put their waste into the bin. It has a little hole where the fly can come in, lay eggs, and then fly out naturally. You don't have to do anything. And then the eggs and crack, they eat all the waste, and then they crawl out into a small contraption. They're captured, and then they can feed them directly to the chickens. So that's the idea there. So there's two businesses: the small-scale bin that we'll sell, where people can produce their own, and then the large-scale commercial for production for feed producers to then sell to chicken farmers.
How can you make sure that the maggot is definitely going to crawl into the bit that it's meant to go to?
So it's actually amazing. These maggots, they naturally crawl out. After they're done eating, they're looking for somewhere that's dry and away from waste. So they just look for any kind of exit that will get them out of the waste. So we just put some tubes down and lead to a hole, and they follow those tubes and go right out the hole and fall into the area where we want them to go.
Oh, right. And so how much is one of these bins going to cost?
So we don't know the prices yet. We're trying to make them as cheap as possible. Ideally, they would be, $20 for a bin, so that anyone across Dar es Salaam or in small-scale farmers can buy these bins to take care of their waste issues and also to take care of any feed issues, and even possibly selling the extra maggots at the market in the same way that they sell fish meal.
Okay, so can you explain what is fish meal?
So fish meal is essentially these small little fish, mostly. Here we call them daga, which people catch in nets and then they dry them out. You've probably seen them maybe drying somewhere if you go to local villages or near fishery people doing fishing. They're drying out and they're just a small little fish, and then they make that's essentially fish meal.
Okay, so what's your sort of route to market going to be for these bins?
So these bins, we're looking at offering financing for people. We've spoken to Airtel, Copa, Kiva, different agencies that would be able to offer financing so that people could essentially buy one of these bins off financing and then pay it back from the savings they see from not having to buy feed or from selling the maggots.
Okay, and so what's the price of fish meal? Like, what do you think that the payback would be?
Yeah, definitely. So the price of fish meal is actually very, very high in Tanzania because fisheries continually decline. 1 kilogram of fish meal can be between 1,000 to 2,000 to even 3,000 shillings, depending on ups and downs. Sometimes fish meal isn't even available because they can't catch enough of it, and it sells out. So we expect that a person with our bin can produce around 1 kilogram of maggots in a 1 to 2 day period, and then be able to sell that for around 2,000 shillings, which is about $1. So the idea is that in 30 days, you should be able to make around $30 from the bin from just them selling the maggots, and then be able to pay off your bin in up to 2 months.
Oh, right, so a 2-month payback.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have the numbers perfectly yet. We're doing a lot of prototypes. We have about 20 prototypes in the field in Dar es Salaam right now, where people are testing out, and we're trying to see, what's the right amount and how many can they produce, and is there also cost savings from waste? Some people pay per how much waste they have, and some people pay just a monthly fee. Doesn't matter how much waste they have. So there could be additional savings from that area as well.
And at the moment, is it just in Dar es Salaam that you're operating?
Yeah, our recycling business also works with some customers out of Tanzania. Unilever has a big tea plantation that we work with. We've worked with Kilimanjaro, which is a massive sugar plantation out of Dar es Salaam. So we also do work with some other people on the outside of Dar es Salaam specifically. But about 10% of the population is in Dar es Salaam and almost all of the industry. So that's where things are happening. And Dar es Salaam is also the 3rd fastest growing city in Africa and the 9th fastest growing city in the world. They expect this place to just grow so fast that it's going to triple in size in the next 20 years. So that means that a lot of waste is going to be produced.
Got it. Do you have any competition?
So not really for the recycler. I'm more or less the only game in town for recycling. And for the maggots, our competition would be the traditional fish meal and soy. But to be honest, the demand for those items is so high that they actually can't reach the supply. The supply can't reach the demand. So there are issues on it. So I would say we don't really have any competition in that. There are other areas that we're going to go into where competition is going to happen. But right now, we're pretty much the only ones.
Cool. And so are there other recycling businesses, let's say in Nairobi or in Uganda? Or is it that you think the Dar es Salaam, the Tanzania market is big enough that you just need to focus on that?
Well, so in Nairobi and Kampala and the different cities in East Africa, there is already a more developed recycling industry that exists. To give you an example, here locally in Tanzania, we get around $22 per ton for cardboard. In Nairobi, you can get up to $110 per ton. So there's a lot of space in the Tanzanian market because there's an oversupply of cardboard, that there's room for people to come in and to do more innovative things with these. Whereas in Nairobi, I don't know so much about Kampala, but in Nairobi specifically, they have a lot of industries that are buying material at much higher rates, and so it already exists in many ways.
Okay. And when you look at the people that you're selling the cardboard onto, the processors, is it that these guys have been in the business for years and you've just sort of made it easier for them to get their raw materials? Or have they sort of noticed that here's a guy who can get us cheap cardboard, let's create an enterprise where we can add value to it?
Yeah, so these guys have been in the business for years. It's the first one. They've been producing cardboard for many years and producing it. Usually they actually make envelopes or even the roll of a toilet paper out of them. So yeah, they've been in the business forever. We're providing them with cleaner cardboard, but our plan is actually to expand and to export cardboard as well, and to buy from what we call informal collectors. There are many informal collectors across Tanzania and Dar es Salaam. There's around 1,000 in the city that collect plastic bottles. These are the citizens that are the poorest in Dar es Salaam. They make less than $1 a day collecting plastic bottles and then selling them to different industries that do shredding and export. So we want to help to expand from just plastic bottles to a wide variety of different items that currently the price base isn't there. It's not worth it for them to make only $22 per ton. Transport costs more than that for cardboard and for other paper products as well. So our plan is to expand and diversify so we can buy a wide variety of products and either do value-added product production on them locally or to export them.
So yeah, I wanted to mention that. So when I was taking the bus in yesterday, I saw loads of like mounds of plastic bottles by the side of the road. Is that these informal?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what happens is informal collectors go and collect plastic bottles. They earn around 100 shillings per kilo, and they sell it to a middleman. That middleman then stocks up, buys from the informal collectors, and then sells to a couple companies here that do shredding. So these companies shred it, and then they export it to mostly China, where it's made into T-shirts or rope, nylon, different things like that. So that's the process of it. So these guys can collect between 10 to 15 kilos a day, which means that they're getting between 1,500 and 2,000 shillings, which is essentially $1 US. So it's a very, very small amount. But in other countries, even in as close as Kenya, these guys are not restricted to just collecting plastic bottles. They're able to collect cardboard and paper and cans and tins and glass because the price is higher. So our plan is to find ways to increase those prices so that we can, have 1,000 different informal collectors be able to collect a wide variety of, increase their income, and have lots more be able to collect as well.
Also, just so I got this right, shredded plastic bottles get turned into T-shirts.
Yeah, some of them get turned into T-shirts. Yeah, polyester. So.
Oh, right, got it. Yeah. When it came to starting this business in Tanzania, was it that you kind of looked at the region and you thought this is the country which is kind of like most ripe for this type of business, or was it you sort of fall into it?
It's hard to say. Looking back, I would say that. I got a job here for the UN, and that brought me here, and that was allowed me to look around, and see the industry and what existed. If I look now and looking back, it seems that this is the country with the most space for recycling industry. As far as maggots go, though, I mean Uganda, Kenya, all of East Africa is ripe for that as well. So.
Okay. And have you found there have been any sort of barriers or hindrances to sort of doing business in Tanzania compared to stories of other East African countries?
So my experience has been very positive. That's not what you'll hear from a lot of different investors in Tanzania, but I invested through the Tanzanian Investment Center, which kind of helps you through the process and helps you get around some of those initial hurdles, which I think helped a lot in the registering of the business. That's not to say that there aren't little things every day that are frustrating, and doing business in a country that is ranked as one of the worst places to do business in the world. But I haven't seen anything to that extent that has made me say that this place is a negative place.
Okay. And do you think that sort of Dar es Salaam will always be the HQ, or is there sort of other areas of the country where, if you look at it from a fundamental perspective in terms of like transport linkages, etc., it might make sense to operate from there?
Well, so we're talking about two different businesses. The recycling and waste management business, it needs to be in Dar es Salaam because of access to a port. So any product that doesn't have a local market can be exported. So that's kind of the benefit of being in Dar es Salaam versus being in Nairobi or Kampala, is you would have to send it all the way across. Also, the population and the industry is here, so that makes more sense for it. With the maggot business, you need waste. You just need organic waste in as much as possible. So, because the industry exists in Dar es Salaam, that makes a lot of sense. But going to Kenya or Kampala, where they also obviously have waste and organic waste, is something that we'll definitely do, either on a franchise basis or just general investment.
When you sort of like look back to 2014 when you were starting, what has been the sort of biggest surprise, or how has what you thought the company would look like differed most to what it actually has turned out being?
Yeah, the issue I had was that I wanted to start a lot bigger. I wanted to have a warehouse. I wanted to do a lot more processing, and I needed to raise a lot more money to do that. And I actually wasted about a year trying to raise that money. And what I realized is people don't want to invest in an idea. They want to go to somewhere where the coffee is already being made, per se, somewhere that already exists. So it's really difficult to get that initial big investment. It's much better to start on a small way, to start with, a couple clients and start earning revenue, and then go for the investment or go for funding in general. I think that has helped. The biggest surprise for us is, I was just surprised when people were actually paying for a service, right? I was surprised that, clients do exist and they're willing to pay for this, and that's always great when you can do that.
Yeah. So how much do you cost?
Depends on the site. It just depends. We do recycling collections for embassies for very cheap, around $170 to $250 per month, and that includes a collection a week and recycling reporting. We tell them exactly how much they recycle of each item every month. Other industries, if we have staff on site or doing larger things, it just depends on, are we also taking the general waste to the dump sites? How much. If we're getting large amounts of plastic or cardboard where we're actually making money on the recyclables, then we give rebates for that and give it back. One of our clients recycles almost 70 tons of glass a month, and so we give them a big rebate on the back of that. So yeah, it's stuff like that.
Cool. Is there danger? Is there a possibility that the government might start providing this essentially waste pickup service?
So the government tries. They do. The municipalities give waste collection services, but we're not a general waste collector in that sense, right? They aren't offering. They will offer the collection of general waste only. They won't, be able to find all the different industries and be able to, process the different material in a way that they can also do recycling. Even in developed countries, it actually costs more money to do recycling than it does to just pick up the waste and take it to the dump site. countries pay, municipalities and subsidize these industries. For instance, in South Africa, what happens is with plastic bottles, for example, Petco is an organization that was formed. So all producers of plastic bottles, so your Cokes, your Pepsis, who bring in plastic bottles, have to pay us or are voluntarily pay a small fee that then goes back into the industry to help subsidize and increase the collection, to help the price of plastic to go up, and all things like that. And none of that exists here yet, and probably won't. Also, governments pay kind of on a per house basis for recycling collections. All of this kind of stuff is subsidized in other governments. So we're trying to do it on just the basis of the price of the material, which is more difficult, but because labor is quite a bit cheaper here, it is possible.
See, and in some of the other countries I've been to, when you sort of you drink your bottle of Coke, you then have to return the glass bottle.
Yeah.
The bottle is not smashed up. I don't think it's smashed up and actually, you probably tell me. Does that sort of operation?
Yeah. So even in Tanzania, most of the market for Coke and Pepsi is actually glass, which is incredibly sustainable in comparison to even recycling. So if it's not recycled, it lasts. Glass can last for up to 1 million years in a dump site. If it recycles, you have to use lots of energy to, melt it and heat it into the shape of the bottle that you want. So the best thing you can do is if you have a bottle and you're able to give it back, and then it's taken back to wash. So beer bottles and Coca-Cola bottles, all this already happens, and to me this is the most environmentally friendly process. But any imported beers, any wine bottles, any non-Coke bottles, this doesn't happen with. So that means that there's no deposit, there's no kind of take-back system. In many ways, this deposit and take-back system is way more environmentally friendly than America or Europe, in the sense that it doesn't use as much energy to recycle, where most of the places in America and Europe are not doing systems like that. Also, they're working on plastic. The other issue with Tanzania is, though, that they're moving into plastic. So the Coca-Cola and the big companies are replacing these glass bottles, which are incredibly sustainable, to plastic bottles, which even if they're recycled, are not nearly as sustainable as returnable glass bottles.
See. So, what is the main? Okay, so it's then basically going away from this. Get the glass bottles, wash them, to this more. I imagine plastic bottles are probably better for consumer. Is that the reason they're doing it?
People don't really know. It's cheaper actually for them to do glass from the information that I've received. Glass bottles, the only difficult thing for them is that you have to either drink it right there or you have to return with the glass bottle, so it's less convenient. So the main issue with the Coke bottle is that they want it to be as convenient as possible, so you can take it away and do whatever, which is really unfortunate, to be honest, because what it means is that you're going to have plastic, and even if the plastic is recycled, it's not nearly as, a lot of times it's downcycled. So plastic bottles, if they go and are made into shredded, sent to China, made into either a t-shirt, or say they're made into a type of rope, or a type of a less good plastic, like a plastic wrap or something like that, chances are that that's actually not going to be recycled after that. So you're only getting one lifespan out of it. Even glass gives you multiple lifespans. You can recycle glass over and over and over again. That's not the same for plastic.
See, when I was in Germany, they did the sort of the glass returning thing. Is it a case that kind of countries kind of like evolve back into this more efficient way of doing it, or what's the? Yeah,
it's a great question. So there's this new movement called zero waste, and what zero waste is, it's actually anti-recycling. It says that we shouldn't even be recycling. 70 years ago, we didn't have plastic. We didn't have these type of things. We should be creating and designing things in a way that we don't actually throw it away at all. We are able to reuse it. Things should have lifespans as long as people. They shouldn't be continually thrown away. And so what you're seeing in Germany is they're having containers, but even that isn't quite good enough. My wife is very big into the zero waste movement. So at our home, we eliminate plastic and packaging, and everywhere we can, she goes to the market, or she goes to the shops, and she brings her own containers. She asks the people in the meat to put it in there. She buys pasta in a way that, she makes her own toothpaste. She does everything she can do to eliminate the packaging waste that exists in society. There are a lot of people that are doing this now, and this whole movement of zero waste is saying that we need to rethink the way that we just continually throw things away, because there's no throwing away. And even when you're recycling, you're reusing precious resources.
So the idea is that everyone has like a durable container, and they essentially go around to each shop and get it filled up.
Exactly, and it's really easy in Tanzania because rice, comes in big bags, right, which are reusable. So it comes in like a big what we call bulk bags or PP bag, which is filled up and then taken back and refilled. So we come with our little container. We fill up the rice in our container, and we don't use any plastic, and they don't use any plastic, or they don't use any kind of packaging whatsoever. You go to the butcher, instead of them giving you in a small container or having it wrapped, you just ask them to put it directly into your container. So this is kind of where the whole the whole world should be heading in the future.
Got it. And so when you talk in the future, when you sort of fast forward and imagine what the recycler business might look like in sort of 3 to 5 years, what do you see?
Yeah. So ideally, what happens in developed countries is you have a separation kind of between organic and recyclables at every household, right? So you have bins for both of these. This is a very expensive process. It costs the municipality or the government lots of money to subsidize it. There's a nice crow behind us. We can talk about that if you want. Yeah. They subsidize it, but that's not possible here. The government has so many other issues, poverty, malnutrition, education, that they have to worry about before they're in a place where they can say, well, let's separate the waste on a house-to-house basis. So we want to try to find ways to do this almost organically. If our bin is given to residents all over Dar es Salaam, and they naturally separate the organic waste from their what would be dry recyclables and non-recyclables, then we can find ways to already organically separate it, because they have an incentive to produce maggots. And then no one's going to go collect. I can't collect on a house-to-house basis. It costs too much money. But if we're buying the material per kilogram from what we call the informal collectors, so if we create a market for every single amount of material that people use, not just plastic bottles, to expand it to everything from cardboard, paper, glass, to non-recyclables. We've got a project right now with a local cement company where we're looking to use non-recyclable plastic that can't be recycled as energy. So the idea would be if we could create kind of a zero waste society where people are using organic waste and we're buying everything else that is not recyclable, or other companies are buying non-recyclable or recyclable waste, and we get rid of waste completely.
Awesome. And people listening at home, how can they follow the journey of the recycler? What's the best way to sort of keep tabs on you?
Yeah, we have a recycler page. Our website's recycler.co.tz, and our Facebook page is Recycler Tanzania, so Facebook/Recycler Tanzania.
Awesome. Well, Matthew, that was super interesting. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Cool. Before we head, just a quick moment to say thank you for listening. You can see the show notes of this episode by heading to samfloy.com/podcast and then searching for the episode title. That's samfloy.com/podcast. Now, a few people have got in touch and have been asking about how this podcast came about. And well, it all started when I took a one-way flight to Rwanda to seek out business opportunities across the region. I'm now at the stage of formulating a bit of a plan of the business I want to go into, based on all of these podcast interviews, and we'll be keeping a record of what I get up to on my blog. And so if you're interested in being kept in the loop, you can sign up to the newsletter there. Again, it's samfloy.com. Also, if you have any questions, comments or feedback about the podcast, or indeed anything, please feel free to email me, podcast@samfloy.com, and I'd be very happy to chat. In any case, have a great week and speak to you soon.